Hello, everybody, and welcome to A Higher Future. I am UB Simigneti, along with my co-host, Dr. Nicole Gravagna. Hello, Doc. How are you?
Hi, UB. Nice to be here with you today.
Excellent. Yes, I am very excited. And then we also have our guest co-host, Nina Baliga, who is also a co-host with our guest and I on our quote-unquote sister podcast called Choose Inclusion. Hi, Nina.
Hey, thanks for having me today as your guest co-host.
Yeah, this is kind of exciting. It worked for Ellen, and I think Jimmy Fallon and all those people. So our guest today, I think globally, he's known as a civil rights activist for people with disabilities. He's the executive director of the Blind Institute of Technology. Lesser known as a karate champion. I'll let him explain that. But Michael Hess, welcome to the show.
Really happy to be here. It really is a pleasure. Love what you're doing with this concept, and Doc, love what you do and the perspective that you're bringing, and Nina and Ubaldo. This should be a fun conversation today.
I think we're supposed to be gushing on you, Mike, not the other way around.
We're so happy to have you here.
I know how to pander, okay? Like I really do.
Good point. It's a very good point. Well, okay, so why are we here, right? So we, the show, we really want to hear and talk about the future of work, as it relates to from everything from hiring to underrepresented groups of people to how companies need to start thinking about the future, especially in the midst of the COVID pandemic. But also in the midst of these conversations now around systemic inequalities and oppression and these groups of people who haven't ever really truly been given an opportunity. And your focus, Mike, is the disability community because they're frankly the highest rate of unemployment. Is that right?
Well, if you look across, the percentage of individuals with disabilities, not only here in the United States, which is estimated at 65 million globally, which is estimated at 1 in 7 individuals. So when you start doing just that from a marginalized community, it really is a fairly significant marginalized community when you think about it from the pure numbers perspective.
Wait, 1 in 7 what?
Individuals with disabilities globally.
1 in 7 people.
Yep, 1 in 7 have identifying with a disability. That's per the United Nations, correct?
Yes. Okay.
I mean, those are big numbers, right? But if you talk about it's an untapped potential, right?
I truly believe. I think the concept of and regardless of where you are in the world, so the best unemployment or the best employment numbers and individuals that are participating in the employment sector are here in the United States. But so even the best numbers that you can find within the people with disabilities community, call it 30-40% participation, from demographics within the people with disabilities community. Okay, so those numbers of participants across country for country, they continue to go down. So what ends up happening, if you think about that, like they really are, what you would say is a burden on different countries, and how they are supported from country to country at that point. So instead of investing your money in kind of a social service support model, leverage what I believe is an incredibly talented, determined, innovative, talking about problem solving, like every day, obviously pre-pandemic, but even during the pandemic, solving for like how to get from point A to point B on time, going from meeting to meeting, how to bring my technology, allow myself to be a productive, professional. Like that problem solving prowess, I think, is very pervasive within this community. And again, I'm using the broader people with disabilities community, so not just blind, visually impaired, but deaf, hard of hearing, neurodiverse. There's, per the World Health Organization, the number one cause of disability globally is depression, anxiety, right? And so how do you navigate, with very serious situations like that? Everybody is very unique with how they approach that, but approach it, they will, and they do. And that's something that should be celebrated within industry when industry is looking for problem solving.
Mike, I'm going to cut you off for just a moment. Can we go back to what you said about in the US, people who identify as having a disability? What was the unemployment rate?
So the number is estimated at 65 million, right? So, and depending on which, call it demographic within that, whether it's blind, visually impaired, whether it's deaf, whether it's neurodiverse, right? So the percentages kind of fluctuate, but they, kind of on average, the unemployment rate for the broader people with disabilities, the unemployment is around 70%. And then if you start throwing in kind of
That's
the
crazy. Hold on, let's just stop there. 70% of people who would otherwise be capable of doing productive things, adding to economic development, making money for their own families and themselves, and in general, staying out of trouble because they go to work every day. Those people are not employed.
Correct. And then you break it down to that's, and the percentage that are actually participating in the workplace or actively attempting to participate. So those numbers are super low too, like 35-40%. So you have the 70% of this really small number, right? So you're not even so systemically, so within, call it the blind, visually impaired community, there's like two automatic ways to get Social Security disability insurance here in the United States. One is imminent death. You're going to die within 9 months. The other is blindness. So you're creating this like systemic, like, oh, well, you're blind. Well, you should just be, a social burden, right? So there's this, so systemically, there are some things that are in place that, quite honestly, don't necessarily motivate or inspire or encourage the participating within, the workforce.
Now, I want to be super clear about this. It might not be easy for someone who has their sight to understand if it's possible to work or not. But I want to be clear that you do not have your sight and you
Correct.
run a nonprofit organization.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and we run as, so our model, Doc, is actually, we run as a nonprofit staffing agency. So, our end goal is to help blind, visually impaired, and the greater professionals with disabilities community. We stay very focused on the professional side of the house. That's the language I speak. Kind of growing up my career in the Fortune 5, Fortune 600 technology space, and so we act as a nonprofit staffing agency, going to organizations nationwide, and really getting them introduced to some amazing professionals with disabilities and helping them with their diversity, equity, and inclusion belonging initiatives for the people with disabilities community.
So you're intimately familiar with sending people with disabilities to work.
100%.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here with us today.
which to me, I look at the future of work, and to me, the future of work is absolutely, I think it's the best time in history. Truly, like the very unfortunate, George Floyd, which again spurred, call it the third or fourth or fifth, I don't know how many waves of the Black Lives Matter movement, the very unfortunate waves, which are, and it really was this very public display of egregious, murder, right? So, spring of 2020, when that happened, and so there was this huge influx in, Black Lives Matter and inclusion, equity kind of conversations. Well, BIT's been around for a minute, and we've been talking about, again, partnering with organizations around their DE&I efforts, specifically around the people with disabilities. So leveraging, right, this unfortunate incident, but getting more companies to actually talk about inclusion. So literally, like, one of my kind of conversation pieces is, as you're having inclusion conversations, can we be a bit more inclusive with our inclusion conversations, right? So not being exclusive and just saying, oh, you poor blind people or you poor deaf people. No. Let's just be more inclusive as we're having these inclusion conversations.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? Like it's, and I think if you look through history, right, these trends start to repeat itself. So it starts with um, women, right? Like we're going to hire a woman onto this team of all white males, for example, and then it progresses to people of color, and then it progresses to people with disabilities. Like it's sort of this cycle that we're stuck in. But your point is, you know, why the conversation should include anybody and everybody. It doesn't matter
Right.
anymore, right? Like it should now include everybody, and so we're kind of caught up now with the disability community.
Well, actually, in your some amazing momentum that took place at the beginning of the 21st century is obviously the relationship orientation, right? LGBTQIA plus community that made, I think, tremendous progress, at the beginning of the century. So, and quite honestly, at the beginning of Blind Institute of Technology, and kind of as I was learning my sales pitch, like learning and leveraging a lot of that amazing. So again, I use the very specific language, professionals with disabilities, right? And and I understand Blind Institute of Technology. But I'm blind, and I think I told so I got the name because of the technologist at heart that I am, and I took the binary bit, the 0 and 1, and created the acronym Blind Institute of Technology. But so BIT as a concept, we're leveraging technology always as that mitigator, which to allow people with disabilities to have an experience like all people should. And the amazing Nina here has an amazing TEDx talk that talks about accessible technology is actually just good for business, period. And there's all kinds of amazing statistics that talk about that. But so when I was first coming up and talking about Blind Institute of Technology, representing the broader professionals with disabilities, it's because of the LGBTQIA conversation, and realizing like when they were like in their silos and only talking about the L or the G or the B or the T, right? Like when they were only in their silos, like it was almost like they were working against each other. And so with BIT very much focusing on, it's that collective talking about like, so Blind Institute of Technology, we absolutely get, folks who are deaf, folks who are hard of hearing. We've gotten people on the spectrum placed, motor skills impaired. So if they've got professional chops, that's who we represent. That's who we're taking to the biggest companies in the world.
Well, what have those conversations looked like, Mike? I mean, I think, when people talk about the diversity, equity, inclusion conversation, you're right. Like people with disabilities often get left out of that conversation. What has, come up as you're talking to these companies about, not just the employment rates, but, what it means to actually employ people with disabilities or get them involved in your hiring?
Sure. And it's interesting because it's very much kind of like that, again, going back to your TEDx talk, like I leverage the fact where, again, the business case is very clear now. Like this isn't like you don't make your digital environment, right? Your digital user experience accessible because it's like a feel good story. It's actually really good for business, and you want to attract consumers from all demographics. And they know that like within the United States alone, the disposable income for people with disabilities, okay, as a collective, all right, let's go back to that 65 million, is that disposable income is higher than both the Black and Latinx communities combined. And so again, it's a business case. So leveraging that. So, and then you take that. So that's the business side of things. Like you're doing that digital. Well, so then if you take that business case and just start saying, well, your environment can become really systemically and naturally accessible by actually just, instead of just focusing on this like one effort, like now leveraging that capital investment to your internal teams and and we also know that organizations who really invest in diversity, right, across the board outperform their peers in the same vertical. Like, so the business case, so I use business language to talk to these business leaders across the board. So that's the kind of business case. However, still, many people have never worked side by side with a blind person, side by side with a deaf person. So how do you do that? So kind of the next step of saying, okay, cool, I get the business case, but I still have this, like, how do you do what you do component. And I explained to them, like, okay, well, so if a blind person is able to navigate and order a plane ticket on, give whatever airline, or order a product from Amazon, or do all those other kind of things, like, those user experiences are actually way more complicated than most systems internally. So if screen reader technologies and other kind of assistive technologies are able to do that, like being able to do internal systems where, as you guys know, inside of professional America, like most of the time it's glorified spreadsheets. It's other kind of systems that are just real simple UIs. They're not all dolled up with all the marketing jargon that's out there. So actually being able to negotiate different systems, most systems are actually CLI or command line interfaces anyway. So just explaining to them, like, how do you do your job is actually a really easy assistive technology solution. And so again, keeping the business conversation at a business level, like never saying like, oh, and by the way, like this is just really good for your overall culture, even though like the silver lining is that it's really good for your overall culture.
You're making it sound, Mike, like it's actually pretty easy to hire people with disabilities.
Well, I'd like to say it is the hardest thing to overcome. So cool. As I connect all of those binary dots, Doc, the hardest thing to overcome is stigma and perception.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so who's doing a good job of this?
We have a couple of organizations that we worked with nationally and literally help build entire teams. Who those team members have now been promoted and promoted even more, and now hold great positions. So Aetna, CVS, we've been doing work with them literally since 2014. A year after BIT came into effect, and so they've been bringing on talent from ours literally year over year, and in our retention rate for all organizations actually is actually like 96.7%. So individuals that we have stay on for more than 6 months, they're still there. Right. So again, another going back to the business, solution or business conversation, like attrition, like it's a major conversation piece for organizations. There's a cost to attrition. Well, so for our folks, because quite honestly, let's be honest with the conversation, people with disabilities do not have the same opportunities as our fully able-bodied peers. So job hopping, quite honestly, is not a thing in our culture as a whole, right? So we're very much like we find a home that's absolutely like willing to take us. We're like, yep, we're there. Like we're, we don't, we're not, the commute. Like there was a job, my last job before I came, started BIT. Like I had a 90-minute 3-bus commute each way.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, but guess what? Like I was a 6-figure engineer. So do you think I was on that bus at 5:19 every morning to make sure I was at work by 7?
Isn't that, I mean, isn't it incredible? Like, well, and the other thing I always remember you telling me was, this is also a community of people who are pretty highly educated because, they haven't traditionally been able to get a job. So they go back to school, right? Or they learn.
100% actually. So it's so the candidates that we have, and literally globally, almost 50% of the candidates that come to us have a bachelor's or more. So almost 50%. So and here's the unfortunate thing, ladies and gentlemen: your tax dollars, my tax dollars, are paying for their education. So we're doing all this social investment in this community, and yet the business community is not reaping the benefits. They're not taking advantage of the benefits of this very innovative, very loyal, highly educated community. And so BIT is literally taking it and obviously working very, very directly with you, Doc, to attempt for us to help with that stigma and perception conversation, and recognizing you're the one who introduced this concept, like, because I was like, man, there's like despair, because I have amazing conversations with organizations all over the country. So in It is the dial is moving. It is absolutely moving. Okay. However, there are like I might be blind, but I'm not dead. Like I can feel like the energy with conversations with people where they're just like, yeah, I don't, this is all good, Mike. However, like, so, and I always like, there's like this fear of blind people. Like there's this fear of deaf people. There's this like innate, so I came to, literally a neuroscientist, Dr. Nicole here. Not going to say the last name, Dr. Nicole, and said, can you help me put together some language around this fear of, the dark, and this fear of, and so of course working with a neuroscientist, she goes, Mike, it's actually bigger than this fear of the dark. This is behavioral economics. This is exactly what Dr. Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2002 for this concept of loss aversion. So loss aversion is this very real conversation that affects everybody. Anybody who has this thing called empathy, which by the way is only in the human of the species, like this ability to actually kind of empathize with somebody else when they see somebody with this very physical, challenge, whether it's motor skills impaired in a wheelchair, whether it's deaf, blindness, those kind of things. We as human beings, we can empathize, we can put ourselves in those shoes. And quite honestly, that's where that fear comes to bear. Where like, yeah, that scares the crap out of me.
Mike, I've never asked you, you can feel in people when you're standing in front of them and they're having their loss aversion experience. They're uncomfortable, there's anxiety. You're feeling that from them. You're hearing their voice, you're probably just feeling it in your body near them. How do you get them past that? Do you have a coping mechanism that helps somebody you're standing near get to the other side of their anxiety?
I just hug them.
The friendliness then. Friendliness.
Yeah.
He cracks jokes. Just
people,
like you did right now.
Yeah, people love being hugged by strangers, especially strange blind guys, right? Like they just love that. It's honestly, it's obviously self-deprecating humor. Again, I'll be the when I do speak, like in front of large audiences, kind of in person. If I'm up on stage, I love, with my cane, I love going up to the edge of the stage. Like I'm not standing behind the podium, as this, like I grab my, my wireless mic and I go up to the edge of the stage, right? And I put my cane down and I'm like, what is this? 3-4 feet down. And I could just feel the people in the audience are like, oh crap. And I'm like, is this the no splash zone right here? Like I've got to kind of shake people free of this idea that like, I'm not again, blind doesn't mean that I'm just like gonna fall down and so I got to start breaking some of those stigmas and perceptions, and I do this super intentionally. And then a lot of times I'll I'll just kind of like I'll because of my martial arts background, obviously I have very good balance, but I'll like, step 1 foot over, the edge and everything else. And just, again, I do it because I can hear this collective, like, oh crap, so,
well, and it's interesting, Mike, we on Choose Inclusion, right. We had a comedian, who's a stutterer, Jose. And he talked about, that self-deprecating humor, right? But more as a way of controlling his conversation, his own story, right? Like you're taking control of the story and you're letting people know that, that, hey, it's okay. Like I get that you have this loss aversion or this fear, but guess what? It's okay. And so I feel like there's a component of that maybe too.
100%. Right. So, love talking to Jose about that, right? Where he and I mean, you and Nina could totally feel this connection that, like, I think, people with disabilities, there's gosh, and it crosses cultures in a way that even like gender or relationship orientation doesn't always cross, those cultural bounds. But with disabilities, like there's this kinship, right? That, We know what it's like to be in a room. Like again, I could be in a room full of white males. Apparently, I'm white, right? And I'm still gonna be the unicorn.
Yeah.
Right. There's this component, like again, being the minority amongst the minority, that until you've felt that, experienced that, like that creates that bond that I love. And again, we Lex Gillette again, like like for months I was kind of talking about, like there's this kind of this different feeling even amongst, but it's one thing for a white guy to be talking about this, but then Lex came on, African American, amazing Paralympian, all this all this kind of stuff, right? And you guys heard him say, he goes, yeah, I never felt the sting of discrimination for my blackness, but I feel it every day from my blindness.
Right.
Right. And that's just, that like but that's one thing for a white guy to say that.
Right. Well, yeah, I think, yeah, you're exactly, well, and I think that's why there has been so much global recognition recently, lately too, for disability voices and advocates. I mean, you've been you've been featured in the UN, some of their communications, the International Labor Organization. You've been on a couple of global lists of top 40 voices. So I think yeah, I see this like amazing momentum,
I agree.
within this community. So, like, final question.
Sure.
Or Nina, you had something, but I was going to ask, like, what to you, what is the future of work?
Future work truly is because again, with the pandemic, what we were able to experience, it actually totally verifies this too, right? Like there was this global experiment that remote work can be productive work. And to that end, like Salesforce just came out, it was this week or earlier this week, where like 95% of their workforce is going to be permanently remote. So again, there are major brands that are committing to global remote kind of work. Well, that totally benefits the broader professionals with disabilities community, where sometimes logistics, again, I did the whole 3 buses 90-minute commute because I have a family to raise, right? But holy buckets, isn't it so much nicer to know, like like all I got to do is brush my teeth, grab my coffee, and go to my office space, like, and that's because that's obviously just a little bit more helpful for people with disabilities as well. So I truly, like, again, I'm a glass half full or 3/4 full guy. You guys know that about me, but I truly believe, like, the pandemic, there's going to be some silver linings that come out of this for the broader. And then of course platforms like Salesforce, which is 100% accessible for, totally blind people, where you have organizations like, SaaS providers that are ubiquitous and enterprise oriented, that are 100% committed to accessibility, not just from the user experience perspective, but from the workforce, empowering entrepreneur and employment perspective. And that's, so to me, I see the future of work and kind of everything that's happened, taking the horrific acts of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter and the pandemic. I really do look at this as like, this decade is never looked brighter for the broader professionals with disabilities community globally.
Amen.
Is that a mic drop?
I think so.
Mic drop. Absolutely.
With the mic drop.
Thank you guys for having me. I love what you're doing with this concept. I'm thrilled. Like, I'm so honored. I so respect and love not just what you guys do, but how you guys do it. I feel that it's truly an honor to not only be kind of a co-host, but truly be considered your guys' friends. So thank you for having me on, and thanks for doing what you guys do.
Oh, thank you. Absolute pleasure. Doc, any parting words?
Oh, so many. I wish this could go on for hours, but I really appreciate your vision of the future, no pun intended, that this is an optimistic time, that there were some good things that came out of the pandemic for the community that you serve, and that it will become a bit of a leveling field for so many people. That's such a wonderful thing to come out of this pandemic.
Thanks, Doc.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Awesome. Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Dr. Nicole. Thank you, Nina, for guest co-hosting with us. We're really excited to be bringing this new podcast to you, the audience. You'll be able to subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as a few other streaming stations. And then just check the link that we'll provide you to get access to the website page for the podcast. But thank you all again, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.